Earlier this week, Kate gave you some tips and tricks explaining what to do if your new shiny electric vehicle had started to resemble a certain citrus, either because of persistent faults since she first took ownership, or perhaps build quality issues that just can't be fixed. Of course, finding your new-to-you EV isn't everything you'd hoped isn't pleasant, but it is at least mercifully rare, and most people find that their new car doesn't suffer any major problems in the first few years of ownership that might sour your relationship. And while automakers may try and make your problematic vehicle easier to live with by adding some sweeteners to your ownership experience, a far more common problem with EVs we're seeing today is one that won't impact your day-to-day ownership, but will certainly impact your financial position on your vehicle. Depreciation, how quickly an asset loses financial value over time, is unfortunately now approaching an all-time high in the EV world, with some EV models losing tens of thousands of value in their first 12 months of ownership. So today, I'm going to focus on why it's happening, explain what we can do about it, and how you, as an EV owner, can ensure you feel as little impact from depreciation as possible. Because this video is one that deals with financials, as usual, I'm going to throw in the usual Transport Evolved disclaimer. I'm not a financial advisor, and like any big purchase, if you are considering buying a new car, you should certainly do your research before signing, as well as consider engaging the services of a professional to make sure you're not getting yourself into a bind. We're going to start today's video with a refresher on what depreciation is and what can affect it, and then I'll get to how it's currently impacting the value of EVs. I'm not an accountant, but as Investopedia notes, depreciation is an accounting practice used to spread the cost of a tangible or physical asset over its useful life. In the non-accounting world, however, depreciation, at least when it comes to cars, can be thought of as the difference between what you paid for the car versus what the car is worth when you sell it on. Depreciation isn't linear, and it isn't always easy to tie down. It's well known that vehicles usually suffer the greatest depreciation shortly after they're purchased by their first owner, with most cars historically suffering around 20% of depreciation in their first year. After 5 years, historically, on average, cars lose about 60% of their original MSRP. But because of fluctuations in demand caused by a whole host of different factors that I'll come to in a second, and things like how your car is treated, how far it's driven, and how regularly you get it serviced, the actual value of your individual car can be higher or lower than the standard baseline. Parts availability, desirability, and how long the vehicle was also in production can also impact depreciation. It goes without saying that sometimes, usually in extreme situations, the value of a used vehicle can actually appreciate, rising rather than falling due to things like market demand, and can fluctuate quite dramatically on both a national and a regional basis. For example, if there has been a major natural disaster in your area that has destroyed a significant number of vehicles, you can actually see a slight uptick in vehicle value a few weeks after the event as people whose vehicles were written off by insurance companies look to find replacements. And of course, when an automaker launches a brand new model, there will be a noticeable drop in the value of the vehicle that it replaced, especially if that new vehicle comes with bells and whistles its predecessor did not. In the EV world, that last bit is sadly always universal. Take the Nissan Leaf. It is, after all, the longest in-production electric car on the market today. When it launched in late 2010, it came with a 24 kilowatt-hour usable battery pack, but over its production lifetime, the battery pack capacity has grown, first to 30 kilowatt-hours in the car's original body design, then to 40 kilowatt hours, and then later 62 kilowatt hours in its refreshed second generation design. Every time Nissan announced a new variant with a larger capacity battery pack, previous versions of the Nissan Leaf suffered a noticeable drop in value. So as a customer, you likely suffered the most dramatic depreciation if you purchased your car shortly before a new variant was announced. Another factor for depreciation, new models from competing brands. If, for example, a rival automaker comes out with an EV that's got better range, more bells and whistles, and a lower sticker price, your EV's value will tank a little faster, especially if it's not able to come anywhere near that fancy new model in terms of specs. Oh, and as soon as there is a major recall or anything that casts doubt on a vehicle's long-term usability, such as a major manufacturing defect, a software flaw, or a battery pack issue, the value of your car will also likely fall. And in much the same way that internal combustion engine vehicle values can be affected by oil and gas prices, so too can EVs. If the oil price goes up and the price you pay at the pump goes up, the value of EVs tend to go up. If oil prices go down, so does the value of your EV. In some cases, you can even see vehicles lose value if they are universally destroyed by early adopters and journalists. Take the Mazda MX-30 EV, for example. It has suffered really terrible depreciation for various things. First, Mazda's original sticker price, while perfectly appropriate for its specs had it actually launched in 2010, was woefully, some might say delusionally optimistic and overpriced for a vehicle launching in 2020. And as soon as the initial hype had faded and people began realising how underwhelming it actually was, sales never really took off, and people who had purchased one saw their vehicle's value plummet. There are some folks who will say that EVs depreciate a lot right now because they're terrible vehicles and only, insert choice derogatory term here, actually buy them. But of course, things are more complex like that. So meet me at the main camera. Cast your minds back to the second half of 2020, when demand for new cars had fallen due to COVID-19, and then cast your mind to 2021 and 2022, where demand for cars had risen again, but the automotive industry, which had slashed its orders for computer chips at the start of COVID, found itself with severely limited access to components for new vehicles. This, in turn, meant that automakers weren't keeping up with demand, and we saw a meteoric rise in used vehicle prices. In some instances, used EVs were selling at or near the MSRP they had when new, despite being several years old and having significant numbers on the odometer. In fact, some people found themselves selling a used EV for more money than they'd purchased it. Market forces are weird things, and I'm not going to try and pretend to understand them en masse, but as for why EV prices are currently falling, I think that's a little more simple. We've got the opposite of what happened during the pandemic. Demand is lower than supply. Automakers are making more EVs than people are buying. Before you get super excited and go, ha ha ha, this proves nobody wants EVs, I'd like to quietly remind you that while there was a small drop in demand in some markets at the start of the year, there is still a global increase in demand for EVs. The issue isn't that people aren't buying EVs, it is that the rate of change in demand is slower than automakers and analysts originally thought it would be because of all of the previously mentioned reasons and more, which we've covered in other videos. Now, automakers have no constraints in parts. They're making more cars than they were a few years ago. And as I just said, while more people are still buying EVs than at previous points in history, not as many people are buying EVs as automakers had hoped. And since the various moratoriums on rent increases that existed for the last few years have now lapsed, and the rental market has become even less affordable than it's been, new cars are out of the reach of more people than ever before. People are keeping their existing cars for longer, which means the cars that are on the market are seeing their prices drop further to become more appealing. Because automakers don't like having cars built with no buyers, they've also been cutting back on their production plans and slapping big, massive discounts on their vehicles to try and shift the ones that exist on dealer lots. That, in turn, has eaten into profits for dealers and automakers alike, making both less eager to make and/or sell and turn their attention to models that they find it easier to make a profit on, like big, gas-guzzling SUVs. It's one big, horrible, nasty mess. Another uniquely EV problem with depreciation can be caused when an automaker stops supporting a particular model. Early EVs were often made in low volumes, and development in EV technology has moved so quickly that your 10-year-old EV is generationally a massive way behind the brand new shiny hotness. Moreover, most automakers either don't want to support those older cars when it comes to battery packs and parts, or just make it so difficult that it's just a pain in the butt to keep an older EV on the road. Here at this channel, we've experienced that multiple times, including with M's Chevrolet Volt with a V and Kate's wife's Kia Soul EV. How big, though, is the depreciation? Well, it depends on your vehicle, its trim level, and who made it. But as a guide, my original Ford F-150 Lightning, a dear Tal, cost me just over $80,000 in purchase fees, while its replacement, Ortega's, while subtly different in specs, was a lot less to buy. After taking into account incentives and cash-on-hood deals, I think I paid an effective price nearly $20,000 less. These kind of deep discounts led to Ford losing significantly more money from its Model E division in the first quarter of the year compared to the year previously, even though EV sales are remaining strong for the brand. Even Tesla isn't immune. Its vehicles have depreciated a lot of late, partly because of a push away from Tesla by customers as they react negatively to some of Elon Musk's recent utterances, and partly because there's more choice in the market, and partly because pricing. So I've given you a bird's eye view of the challenges of the depreciation. So now let's look at what it means for you. First, the sad truth. If you're stretching yourself to be able to afford a new car, you will feel the effects of depreciation more than someone who didn't. And by that I mean if you took out a 7-year loan on an EV with a reasonably high percentage interest rate and the value of that vehicle has dropped like a stone, you are going to remain financially underwater on that vehicle for a very, very, very long time, meaning that if you do need to sell the vehicle before the loan is paid off, or your vehicle is declared an insurance write-off, you might land yourself in a lot of trouble. If you purchased a more affordable model, perhaps used and perhaps financed said vehicle over a smaller period of time, or had a lower interest rate, you might suffer the same monetary depreciation in the real world, but the impact to you will be smaller. Right now, for example, I own a 2017 Chevrolet Bolt EV that is fully paid off. It is ours. It's had any issues taking care of it promptly, and even if our Bolt EV depreciation is higher now than it was a few years ago, frankly, it doesn't really matter to us because it's a functional car that we're spending next to nothing on driving. Should something happen to it, depreciation will, of course, affect our insurance payout, but we're not planning on selling it anytime soon. It's also kind of past its peak depreciation, so honestly, it's less of a concern. If you're in a similar situation, you'll feel the effects of depreciation far less. But if you're someone who needs or wants to keep up with the Joneses, or you had to really stretch yourself to buy your new car, you're going to be hurting a lot if you need or want to sell. That said, not all hope is lost. Dealerships are so desperate to sell new cars right now that they are often offering pretty good trade-in deals, meaning that you might be able to get rid of a poorly performing, problematic, heavily depreciating EV and get a new one. The challenge for that, though, is that you are effectively trading one liability in for another. It's for that reason that I usually recommend it's better to wait and pay off a car before trading up. Of course, if you've already got a car, then me telling you to not stretch yourself in your budget and financing isn't going to help a lot. But luckily, there are some other things you can do to ensure that you protect yourself from the effects of depreciation on your vehicle. First, please make sure you have gap insurance for your finance package. This means that even if your car is totaled in an accident, your total outstanding finance will be taken care of. If you don't have gap insurance and your vehicle is written off, most insurance companies will pay you a fair market value, which might be far less than the outstanding amount on your loan, thanks to massive depreciation. I used to think that gap insurance was something that was only available at the time of arranging your finance package, but I recently learned that my insurance policy had it without me realising. When I wrote off my F-150 Lightning Adira Tal earlier this year, I was lucky because my insurance company paid me more than the outstanding loan amount as the fair market value for my vehicle, and I did not need to use gap insurance. But had it not, the gap insurance would have left my loan all paid off. Yes, unfortunately, you do have to pay more to get gap insurance, but when depreciation is high, it is really quite worth it. Next, if you intend on keeping your vehicle for a long time and want to minimise the effects of depreciation, you're going to want to keep your car in as good a condition as possible. Whether that means using all-weather mats instead of carpeted ones or opting for something like paint protection film and/or ceramic coating, the better protected your car is against day-to-day life, the more likely it will keep it looking like new, and that means the more likely it will retain its value. I think one of the reasons why my insurance company paid me so much for Adira Tal after it was wrecked was because it looked pretty much new. I mean, in the areas not affected by the impact with the massive power line, that is. Keeping your vehicle well maintained will also help. Keep to manufacturer's recommendations for servicing and keep that paper trail of when things get done and who did it. A vehicle with a comprehensive history is always worth more on the used car market than one without. And if you absolutely need to get out of your car and into another, as a certain supermarket chain in the UK is fond of saying, every little helps. What if you need to sell, though? Well, you should consider getting a pre-sale detail. Pre-sale details might cost you a few hundred, but can actually net you a few thousand in extra trade-in or private sale value. In our video from last year on keeping your old car for longer, Jason from Fresh Start Detail here in Portland, Oregon, explained just what the difference can be between a detailed and a non-detailed vehicle at sale. And unless you really have no other choice, stay clear of car supermarkets like the plague. They might have advertising that suggests you'll get the best possible price for your vehicle, but it's usually just that. Advertising. While, admittedly, I do know of a couple of people who have been lucky and got a decent price from a large car supermarket, they did so during the pandemic, and I've also heard some truly horrible stories, especially when a car was a little more unusual or unknown. Carvana and its competitors might be the place to go if you are in the emergency I must sell my car now moment. But for the rest of the time, selling it privately or finding a reputable dealership to sell through could be more lucrative and might dramatically reduce your depreciation. That said, as I noted earlier, Kate told me that she got a really good deal on their i3 at a car supermarket during the pandemic. But it was the pandemic and all cars were going for much higher prices than they would now. So there you have it. Depreciation is hitting EVs really hard right now. Now you know the reasons why and how you can avoid becoming a victim of depreciation. But have I missed anything? If I have, let me know below. Thanks for joining me today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them below in our Discord chat room, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are some of the more than 1,500 people who help fund this channel through Patreon and YouTube. They help cover our bills, pay our team, and they make sure that we can remain 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. There are a range of different tiers you can sign up for, from as little as $1 a month, or if you pay yearly, just over $10 a year. A massive welcome to our newest supporters: Carol Bulawa, Rolfondo, Michael Owen, Winter, and Wilton Live. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your week of fame. And of course, if you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations. We even have a good old-fashioned PO box that you can reach us at. Address you'll find linked below. And of course, if you're in need of some swag, you'll find our swag store in the down below as well. This month, we are celebrating Pride with an amazing new t-shirt design by our in-house artist and animator Erin. You can get yours today by heading to our Redbubble store. We've also got some fantastic content coming up, so make sure that you've hit the subscribe button on either PeerTube or YouTube, and we'll see you soon. We make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we think this one is also well worth a look. See you soon, and as always, keep evolving.